until the end, until the day we will all be dead, until the final judgment, we must smile at each other. This is the way I would paraphrase these sentences. Now, because I don't have much time left, I suppose, let me just say that one could analyze this no sooner, that Derrida himself, in his later work, analyzes in a sense this no sooner said than done, yes? For which the equivalent in German would be even better, gesagt, getan, yes? Said, done, that's the German equivalent. He analyzes this, I will just, some of you will be familiar with it already, mention it, but I will not go into it. He analyzes it, I think, such utterances, a performative dimension of language, in the sense of no sooner said than done. In Politics of Friendship, there where he speaks of telepoiesis, of the telepoietic, where basically, in a way, I am already touched and hit by something, while at the same time everything seems to remain unchanged. And he does so in a text which has been mentioned this morning, I believe, on Hélène Sixou, where he talks about the puis, Hélène Sixou's HC, c'est-à-dire, it's called HC, that is to say in English, about the might, yes, which is also about, you know, you say something, and as you say it, it has already done it. You know, you say it and the event has happened. There's a performative dimension to what otherwise might simply be a mere saying, as it were, yes? So I just want to point you at that. But it is interesting. In the text on Hélène Sixou, which is a difficult text, I think, it is almost as if when you say might, please, might this happen, yes? It has already happened, it's already happening. It's almost as if in these sentences, and sentences like please, which is not really a sentence, of course, making something happen and allowing something to happen touched each other. Derrida speaks of a tautology here. But he says it's almost a tautology, because it also already opens itself up as tautology. What does he mean by that? Why is it also a heterology? I think what he's saying here is that you never know whether the event, you know, maybe you just say please, or you just say smile at me, as I will have been smiling at you until the end, from wherever I am. And as you say it, it already happens. And then it's almost a kind of tautology. But why does it open up to a heterology? Well, because in a way, for it to happen, for it to really happen, for this performative dimension to really prove itself, I have to do something. I have to do something. That is, I have to acknowledge the address here that comes from Derrida. If I don't do that, then nothing will have happened. There won't be such an event. And I think that's also what Cavell has in mind when he speaks of a passionate utterance, yes? When he says, I'm always, when making a passionate utterance, exposing myself to the possibility of you speaking me, yes, of you simply not replying to it at all. I have no time left, so I can read out a very nice quote which I have from Jean-Luc Nancy, where he tries to say something about these sentences from Derrida himself. And I'll just end up by saying then this. Referring to Derrida's from wherever I might be, from wherever I might be. Yes, it's the last words. Souriez-moi comme je vous, when he says, je vous aime et vous souris d'où que je sois. I love you and smile at you from wherever I might be. This passionate utterance, this sentence which is a bit like no sooner said than done, but at the same time, it will only happen if I really do reply, if there's a response, if I do engage with it actively. If I do not rebuke it, if I do not simply ignore it, if I do not simply... From wherever I might be, if we relate to Jacques Derrida, if we take him seriously, if we therefore smile at him, then we will not denounce the talk of a place, wherever I might be, of which we have never heard, as an ironic fiction. We will not do that. But there is nothing else we will need to say either, I believe. Our taking Derrida seriously, our not betraying him after the fact, not murdering him, and only then will he really be dead, if we murder him. as if, so our not murdering him as if the dead can only be dead because I let him die. That's when the dead is real, because I let him die, that's when he will die. Well, this will perhaps show in our behavior, not so much in, you know, big discourse that we engage in our behavior, in what we say, what we do, how we relate to others and to the world. This will be our communication with Jacques Derrida, and his communication with us, no sooner said than done, always exposed to the risk that we forget, deny, betray, murder, or even that we feel abandoned, left behind, left alone, that we feel dead in the middle of life. And let me end with what I think we should be doing. I think for the next 10 years at least, we should stop having conferences on Jacques Derrida. We should stop writing books on Jacques Derrida. We should stop quoting him for there to be a real chance that he comes back.
Hello, thank you for coming. I've got a fully written paper that I don't think I'm going to get out now. It was 20 minutes or something like that, but we'll see how I do. I don't know if that needs to be the class SWOT or just less brilliant than everyone else. It starts off quite prosaically, but what I want to get to is a question of concerning performative contradictions that we heard about earlier this afternoon, and a question of consistency and inconsistency. Because I'm going to do a little tour of certain philosophers who use performativity, like Deleuze and Bergson, in their work, but also one philosopher who has taken up Derrida's philosophy and combining it with Deleuze's work as well, actually, a kind of strange materialist metaphysics, has produced something which he believes is even more consistent in its performativity than Derrida's work. This is the work of Francois Laruelle, a French philosopher who's a student of Derrida, but had a falling out, and I'll talk a little bit about the falling out. But he produces this strange philosophy which he calls a non-philosophy, or non-standard philosophy sometimes, which is all about performance. It's all about performativity, but it's based on the principle of what he calls rigor or consistency. The consistency of what it is to enact non-representational philosophy, a non-logocentric philosophy, a non-representational philosophy. So hopefully I'll get to some of that, and then a kind of way of maybe what Derrida might make of Laruelle's philosophy. Okay, don't read this sentence. I am mute. I am asleep. Everything is alive. These performative contradictions, the source of the many paradoxes that have kept philosophers distracted for centuries, are one major point of entry into the performative aspects of philosophical thought. Speech act philosophers like Austin, Searle, Grice, and Habermas would see such paradoxes in terms of the lack of fit between the content and the execution of an utterance. Saying, I am asleep, does not normally fit well with being asleep, unless, of course, one happens to talk in one's sleep and happens to say, I am asleep when you talk in your sleep. It would be highly coincidental. The misfit, or inconsistency, between the saying and what is said is also important with respect to the performance of philosophies as a whole, and I'm talking about philosophies as a whole here, not just particular speech acts. In Levinas's case, for example, the ethical message found in his major work, Totality and Infinity, concerning the inability of anything in the objective world to totalize our infinite ethical responsibility to the other, seems to be contradicted by the very writing of Totality and Infinity, which is all too adept at conveying its message objectively. Hence, spurred on in part by Derrida's criticisms, the sequel to that text, otherwise than being or beyond essence, plays a far more complex game with language, between content and performance, or the said and the saying, in order to discover any false impression that Levinas's book has something it wants to say, something it wants to say. Likewise, Kierkegaard, who we heard about earlier this afternoon, his whole panoply of devices of indirect discourse in his philosophical writing, irony, use of pseudonyms, parables, and so on, was ranged against performatively contradicting his message that truth, capital T, is subjectivity, capital S, a message that could never be conveyed objectively through a traditionally written book. But note the emphasis on both these figures on using performance to avoid contradiction, to assure consistency. Derrida, for instance,